This time on episode 438 of Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. is our interview with Eric and Julia Lewald.
I'm Willie D. Nelson from All Things Good and Nerdy, a pop culture podcast, part of the Gonna Geek Network, just like the show you're checking out now. Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other tantalizingly geeky shows at GonnaGeekNetwork.com.
You have been granted clearance by director Alfonso Mack Mackenzie. Stand by for a S.H.I.E.L.D. debriefing. All information to be discussed here is classified and may only be discussed among agents granted clearance by the S.H.I.E.L.D. director.
Now it's time for a scheduled debriefing. I'm Agent Michelle.
I'm Agent Chris.
And I'm producer of the show, Director SP. Welcome to Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D., a Marvel Comic Universe fan show discussing the Marvel Cinematic and Marvel comic book universes as told on screen by a small startup of Disney called Marvel Studios. This show is recorded on Saturday, August 13th, 2022, with a previously on, which we'll get to later, live from the Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. studios and broadcast Fox Kids wide. Come and join our live chat as we record. And if you didn't already catch on to it, we love talking about Marvel.
Because of future plans that I'm scared to put out into the world in case they don't happen because I said it.
If you are concerned about future plans, you can talk to us about it on our website, legendsofshield.com.
If you have ideas for where the MCU should go with their next story, definitely don't go on Twitter. But as you say anything else on Twitter, make sure to tag us at Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D.
If you want to voice your concerns about the future, you can leave us a voicemail at 844-THE-BUS-1. That's 844-843-2871.
If you want to make an apology video about how your thing completely ruined it because you went off schedule, you can go ahead and do that and be sure to tag us at youtube.com/GonnaGeek.
You could go into great detail about your concerns about the future on our Discord server at GonnaGeek.com/Discord.
And as always, don't forget that Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. is a proud member of the GonnaGeek.com network, where we keep all of our future plan discussions secret so nobody finds out.
And this was one secret that we were glad to keep held closely. I did reach out to a couple people before we recorded what you're about to hear to try to get any questions that they might have. I reached out to Agent Haley and asked her, since she's a huge X-Men the Animated Series fan. And I also reached out to Anthony from Capes on the Couch, who gave quite a good question, which you will hear in a second. Now, we did this interview about 10 days ago, right before I had to leave to go move my son. Eric Lewald is the producer, basically in modern terms, would be called the showrunner of X-Men the Animated Series, the one that aired in the 90s that we are currently watching through. And his wife, Julia, was one of the writers on the show. We had been talking about the creative team behind X-Men the Animated Series. We went over Margaret Lesh, we went over Sydney I. Want Her, we talked about Larry Houston, we talked about Haim Saban, we talked about a lot of these people, and then we stopped, and you might be thinking, why did you guys stop talking about these creative team? Well, it's because we knew we were going to be talking to Eric and Julia. Well, now we have that chance to bring their story forward. They're very prolific with cons when they can go to them. They were just at San Diego Comic-Con when they were talking about X-Men the Animated Series. They weren't on the panel, but they were there in the room when X-Men the Animated Series 97 was talked about. And they are going different places. They will talk about it at the end of the interview. But they also have a couple of books out there. And if you are into the X-Men the Animated Series at all and want to know what the story behind are, they have the books. Go read them, see the art that was behind the show, and they have some incredible resources. If it wasn't for them, everything that we've been talking about probably would not be available for general public consumption. So these are the people that are behind keeping the knowledge of X-Men, the animated series from the 90s, and basically ran the show. So we are so grateful that they were here for us. I will warn the listener, this interview is 93 plus minutes long, so more than an hour and a half. We are not going to be talking about anything else this episode. You are literally just going to be listening to Eric and Julia. And I might add, you will not be listening to me very much. You will not be listening to Chris very much. You will not be listening to Michelle very much. This is their time to shine. Although both Michelle and Chris did have a chance to ask some questions. So with that, Chris, is there anything else you want to say to our listener before we turn them over to Eric and Julia?
Be ready for a really fun interview. These two are always fun to get to talk to, and I'm so excited for X-Men 97 for reasons I'm scared to put out into the universe.
Michelle?
I was just happy that I was able to form words and be relatively calm in the presence of people who helped shape my younger self.
I might add, they are helping shape the 97 series as well. They are on board as consultants. They are adamant that it is not their show, but they are involved, as are Larry Houston, and I believe all the voice actors that remain are on the show as well. So with that, I feel any more would be a little bit too much. So we're just going to get right into the interview. Joining us is Eric and Julia Lewald, who are the producer and one of the writers of X-Men, the animated series, or more commonly known as X-Men 92. Thank you very much for joining us.
Well, thank you, SP.
This is very nice of you to have us on. Thank you.
Well, this is kind of a dream of a few of us, right, Michelle?
Yes.
And kind of a rehash of Chris, because he spoke to you on Play Comics.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to make this one fun, too. Everybody should definitely listen to both.
Hey, it's magic now that you can do that.
Well, you're working for Disney now, so of course the magic's there.
Kind of. We can't talk much about what's coming up because Marvel and Disney are two of the most, so we say,
specific
companies on the planet. So there's not much we can say about it. But yes, we are helping out on the new X-Men series that's coming out next year in the fall.
Which they announced at San Diego Comic-Con specifically, so we know that's out there now.
And of course, it's a whole new group of people making their series. But they were kind enough to ask us and original producer director Larry Houston to come on as consultants, and in that way, as they put it, we're their first audience, and we respond and say we love that, or gee, I'm not quite sure about that, or we try not to be the crotchety old farts that say, in my day we did it differently. But it's a group of just dozens and dozens of really talented young people that are making this new show next year,
and who grew up on X-Men, the original series.
Yeah, so
loved it,
and that's always very humbling. Say, I was 5 when I watched your show, and reminding us how old we were when we made the show.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I'm a little bit older than that too.
Yeah. So, but yeah, it was very, very thoughtful of them to include us at all.
Yes. Exactly.
9 out of 10 times they do reboots or extensions of shows in Hollywood, they don't talk to the people that did before, because the new people have their own vision, and so it was very nice of them. And by the way, they want to make sure that people understand it's not a rethinking of our old show. It's not another dimension. It's a continuation.
It really is.
So very much you're supposed to think like, okay, I watched the first 76 episodes, and now a short time later, it's picking up with the next episode. Same basically the same cast, having the same history as our show. And so in that, we're really thankful because they could have done almost anything they wanted. I mean, there's 60 years of X-Men stuff out there. They could have really gone any direction they wanted, and they chose to, in effect, continue our show.
I've heard the term used, revival. Would you prefer that or continuation?
Continuation is more precise. It really takes up where the last one left off, and in terms of introduce, and we can't say anything more. Mum's the word.
So why don't we go mum, honey? He gets us in trouble.
Yeah. Speaking of Disney, your episodes that you did of the 92 series are on Disney Plus right now. And just recently, in the last couple of weeks, they've reordered the episodes to be in story order. Yeah. Did you guys have anything to do with that? Did they consult you, or did they just do it? Did they tell you at all?
We were not informed in advance of the actual reordering of the episodes on Disney Plus. But over the last couple of years, we've tweeted it. We've talked with a couple of folks over at Disney Marvel saying some of the episodes are out of order. It would really mean so much if you could get it back in order. We don't know what prompted it, but we've been yelling in the wilderness for a couple of years.
And telling the people we know at Marvel, it's not that many. It was maybe 3 or 4 that weren't in the right place. But if somebody's new to the show and they're excited and they're watching, and suddenly a character who was dead the last episode suddenly is not, or whatever, it's without explanation. There are a number of episodes that were standalones that you could move around a bit and nobody could tell. There was no story issue to them. But initially, when Disney Plus got on the air, even one of the four-parter, Dark Phoenix, was part 1, 3, 2, 4.
Yeah.
And so that one was pretty obvious that this is going to drive people crazy trying to stream this and see it. And there are a couple others that, it's not the fault of the channel so much. During production, a couple episodes were production problems and were held back like a couple of years in struggling to get them done properly. And one of those was really important because it came just after a 4-parter, and it was in effect the 5th episode. And so the people that saw it originally saw it out of order. Mm-hmm. And so that's, again, and it didn't bother so much on the disc, the DVDs, to get them properly. But so there are 3 or 4 that if you were thoughtfully watching, I said, wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense. And someone, caught it finally and said, okay, why? Obviously, it didn't take much effort to just shift a couple around. And we listed them in the books, specifically say, guys, watch them in this order, please, because this is the order we wrote them. And they weren't necessarily broadcast that way. They weren't necessarily on the DVDs that way, but this is the proper way to enjoy the series. So we're thrilled that they were finally able to do that.
Yeah, it was a wonderful announcement for us to hear that.
So growing up, I loved series more of the sci-fi realm, like Star Blazers or Robotech, and I'm still anxiously awaiting a live-action adaptation of Robotech, which, X-Men at least have had live-action stuff. I haven't had mine yet, but I'll get there eventually. But they're both really serialized shows, kind of like X-Men the animated series. Yeah. So other than airing out of order, what were some of the issues that you ran into writing and producing an animated series that was serialized?
Well, just that out of the gate. Because originally, absolute from the beginning, the woman in charge at Fox Kids, a woman named Margaret Lesh, who deserves all the credit in the world for everything on Fox Kids, she was determined to make X-Men the animated series. But her own higher-ups thought it was going to flop. So she put her own, she said, if this fails, you can fire me. But they only gave her 13 episodes. So for those 13, it was you and Mark Edens figuring out what those 13 stories could be, if those were the only 13 that were ever going to be told.
And she gave us, she took the risks. She took lots of risks. But there was a real problem back when it took longer to produce shows. And that was everybody, if you remember when you were little, all the shows would premiere in September. usually within a week of each other. You'd get a big TV guide that said, fall previews, all the new shows are playing. And so animation, which was very labor intensive, I mean, hundreds of thousands of paintings per episode, 4 months overseas in animation. So if we get something back and it's a couple of weeks before air date and it's not right, it might take a couple months to fix. So the problem with in live action, you know it immediately if something's not right, you can tack a day of extra work on and get it right that week. But in animation, you're waiting to have the animation come back. And so networks are justifiably nervous about having episodes 1 through 13 connected. And because the first 3 are fine, there's episode 4 is problematic. You can't show episode 5 for a month. You have to show repeats because you have to fix episode 4 before it goes on the air, and you can't understand episode 5 without episode 4. So 99 out of 100 animation shows, certainly ones we worked on, they would never take that risk of having connected stories. That was just too expensive a problem. Yeah. And we actually had that. In one of the reasons X-Men premiered in January instead of September was there was production problems on 2 or 3 of the first half dozen episodes that took a month and a half to fix. So instead of putting stuff on the air that looked wrong, or the mouths weren't working properly, or whatever the animation problem,
thousands of things that can go wrong.
She said, I'm waiting till I've got 7 or 8 of these locked before we premiere, and so we're moving it back 4 months to January. That was probably a $500,000. That
was a huge call on her part.
Loss to Fox, but she wasn't going to show the show until it was right, and that was half of that problem was that we had shows in order. Otherwise, you could show episode 1, 2, 7, 8, 9, 3, 4, and it wouldn't matter. And you could wait. If ones were coming back and they're working well, you could just move stuff up. But you can't do it when they're in order. So that's the risk in that.
And then for the second season, after the glitches that happened in season 1, you were kind of given marching orders: no more serialized storytelling. But the way to get around that and continue the sense that the story is ongoing was the Savage Land. And all of that got produced.
All that got produced at once at the beginning. So there wouldn't be a problem. So we had a 2-parter to open the second season, 9 individual episodes, which could be moved around depending on if they were produced well or not. And then a 2-parter at the end that resolved the Savage Land problem. So in effect, even though it seems like there's 13 connected, only the first 2 and the last 2 really are in order. And the 45-second bits where you see Professor Xavier and Magneto trapped in the Savage Land, those progress along the second season. The other 9 episodes are interchangeable. I mean, it's hard to imagine changing them now because you've seen them in order, but we specifically were told, sorry, if you want to do something connected, you can only do this. We came up with we'll do 1 minute of each of these episodes, but okay, well, we can do that. We can shoot that first.
And because it was shot first, there were episodes where this one was episode A was supposed to come out, but episode B was ready. So you took the bit of Savage Land off of A, put it on B, flipped the order, and that worked.
Yeah,
that worked at the time.
So that was our trick in the second. And after that, the only things that were really actually in order, specific writing order, were multi-parters like the Phoenix Sagas or other, a couple other 2-parters that we did. But really, only the first season was really written 1 through 13 in order.
I'm getting a sense that your superpower is really your creativity at production and storytelling.
That's very kind. I'll give him that though. Trying to keep track of all the time travel stories and keep track.
Because people ask, how come? I was I cared very much for this show, and I love writing, and I've worked on dozens of other shows. How come I only have 2 writing credits out of 76? It wasn't that I wasn't writing constantly on the show. It's just that I was focusing on kind of keeping it all together and organized, and all of that management part, and making sure it all kind of felt like smooth transition. 20 different people got writing credits, including Julia. And we had to try to make that writing all feel like it was coming from the same place and not repeating itself and being fresh, but yet connected. So all those worries, and then making, the half dozen colleagues who had an interest, the network, Marvel, the production people, making sure all of their worries were taken care of. You get a note back. We'd toss in a story and we get this frenzied note back from the production people. They say, my God, don't you know that's going to triple our budget if you leave that seed in? Can't you do something else? So there are lots of people with a stake in the show. And my job more was being a diplomat and making sure everybody's needs were met and letting the writers write and only fixing it when I had to.
So you had diplomatic immunity.
I did.
Well, I
could pretend it was the writer's fault, but that didn't play very long. So it always came back.
You mentioned that the series premiered in January, but there was kind of a sneak peek in Halloween on October 31st, 1992.
Yes.
Margaret Lesh deserves all the credit in the world for turning lemonades out of the lemons she was handed, because she had episodes 1 and 2 and 4, but episode 3 was not working. I mean, production values were crap. So she had to make the very expensive call. They were going to wait for that extra episode. But in the meantime, when everybody else is starting in September, and we've got the first 2 episodes now, the Sentinels locked, I proposed to do a sneak peek in primetime on Fox to sort of generate interest. And I thought, she's doing it on Halloween? Is she trying to kill the show? Because how are there going to be kids home watching a cartoon in primetime on Halloween?
But there were. And so it ended up being those little dribbles, and they did another sneak around Thanksgiving.
Kids take over Fox, and kids sent in postcards.
So those 2 sneaks built everybody's excitement for this thing that had been delayed. And they forgot, I don't know if they even knew it was delayed. But that built the excitement. And then in January, when it came out, as we said, our dumb luck was that everybody else was in repeats,
right,
and we were a brand new show. So everybody tuned in. That was part of the reason it was successful, was the fact that production problems forced us to delay for 4 months.
So my real question is, since it premiered sneak peek on Halloween, what did you guys dress up as on that Halloween in 1992?
On that Halloween in 1992, I had given birth 3 weeks earlier, and we had a 1.5-year-old. So it was basically taking the kids out for a very short walk, because a 1.5-year-old doesn't necessarily get what's going on, but understands there's candy involved.
Yeah, the 3.5-week-old was a pumpkin. I remember that, because carrying.
I think our older one was a little devil. It was, they were, whatever they were adorable.
The next year, in 93, the older one was Wolverine.
Yeah.
We got a little mini Wolverine
fun
costume. So that just think how cool that feels. You're writing as a character, and kids around America are dressing up as him.
Unbelievable. To this day.
Looking back, it just feels so amazing. I mean, it's fun.
Since this was the first time the character voices were brought to screen, because there was no live action or anything before that, were there any attributes of the voices as the seasons went on that you tried to integrate into the characters they voiced after season 1?
Absolutely. I mean, and you may know, if you look at our first book, that since the show was so really very different from shows that had come before, it was so much more adult and more dramatic, that the first attempt at casting was really terrible. I mean, they were being professional about it
in Canada,
but they all sounded very cartoony, and
because that's all they did.
We had to just kind of stop and take a few weeks and say, no, we need dramatic voices. So then we found them, and somehow it wasn't just us. I mean, it was the executives and the artists. They all agreed, oh, no, the new voices are right. This is what's in our heads when we read the script. This is what's in our head when we look at the storyboards and the comic books and watch these people interact this way.
You got that Bob Harris story.
Oh, yeah.
So nice.
Yeah. And so just a cool way to think about that is that this is the first time you hear the voices. The guy that was like the walking encyclopedia for us at Marvel.
In New York.
Bob Harris in Marvel Comics, because Marvel was a small company at the time, didn't really have production out here. They had their comic books, but they were going through a struggle and they're about to go bankrupt. But Bob was running their 3 X-Men comic lines of comics. So he was the expert. And he was the one that we would send stories to and scripts to and say, are we doing this? Are we doing this right? Are we being true to the characters? Well, Bob went up to the recordings and he said he had the most surreal experience of his life. He started reading X-Men in 1963 when he was little, and he'd read them for that would be 29 years, and he'd been living with them, and they were internalized. But he'd realized he just kind of until you hear a voice, maybe just it's not really concrete. And he's there watching these actors doing X-Men lines, and suddenly it's alive and human. And he said it was this. He said the hair went back on the back of his neck went up. Just how surreal it was to have the things that he'd been hearing all his life, the people he'd been hearing all his life, suddenly come to life. I wasn't a big X-Men guy, so that didn't happen to me. But for Bob, it was a life changer to suddenly hear actors speaking these people.
And I think it's high praise to the voice actors too, that anytime I see any kind of X-Men imagery, those are the voices I hear in my head. We've got $1 billion film franchise, but I still hear the animated series voices in my head.
Something that the series did very well, Michelle keeps on pointing out, and we talk about it as we're doing a watch through right now. We're at the start of season 4 right now, is the social issues that were covered. Right, Michelle?
Yes. I keep saying that the show is supposed to be a warning and not a playbook. So what do you think of some of the moments, such as the Friends of Humanity throwing things in court in the quarantine in Days of Future Past still being relevant now?
I will occasionally, we've only recently started going to cons and festivals because we're not artists. We can't do a voice for you. But with the books, that's given us a chance to go out and really meet some folks who love the show. Because we work out of a home office, we didn't have that experience. But sometimes I'll go, okay, all of you guys who grew up on this show, did we teach you nothing? The world is in chaos. That was a teaching opportunity. Why are we still having these problems? Which is just heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking.
Yeah, it's funny. It's so much a part of its time. I mean, the Rodney King riots were happening when we were writing season 1.
The AIDS epidemic.
When we were just getting
botched
over that, or it just peaked, and we were starting to handle that finally. So all those things were relevant, and I think it points to the fact that we tried to write as realistic human beings and realistic society as we could, as opposed to something fun and entertaining. We just tried to make these real adult people with real adult problems, and imagine ourselves in their place. What would we do if we were confronted with being this different and this conspicuously different? So that it made the writing more fun for us to think that way. But I think what it did was also, we bring up all these moral questions or all the political issues, and it wasn't so much thinking that we'd solve something, but showing, okay, well, here's human nature on display, and you hope for the best. And if you're telling moral tales, you definitely have a position. But it was the only way we knew how to storytell, and it is a shame that things haven't just evolved easily. I think they've evolved, but I don't think they've evolved easily. And 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. So that's fascinating to talk to the young writers on the new show about.
Because they're lasered in on that.
They're lasered in on that, and they say, okay, well, you maybe thought you had some stuff handled in the 90s. Well, it's 2022 now, and we're dealing with a whole new version of that, and we're going to address that in our show. So that was fascinating, seeing them, growing up thinking, oh, well, maybe we've learned something from our heroes in the show, and now looking around and saying, well, maybe it doesn't necessarily save the world. It just informs your ability to see the world.
In 1992, she still doesn't have a name, but the president of the United States was a female, and she wasn't on very long. But hey, if you grew up watching the show, okay, female president's part of that.
Seems plausible. Seems slightly futuristic, but seems plausible.
And then 2016 happened, and oh my effing Lord, that really. But that day may come in real life. We hope so. I mean, we hope the best person becomes whatever is president, regardless of gender or anything else. But again, it's been 30 years, and it wasn't a big deal. It was just the president happens to be female. Keep telling your stories.
And there was people asked us about there was kind of hidden, feminism from the primarily male writing team, but some gals in there. Well, it certainly wasn't conscious. I think it really helped that our boss was a woman, our censor was a woman, and we just looked at the X-Men as superheroes as opposed to being concerned about their gender. And so when we picked 8 to be as different as they could, it happened. It was 4 and 4. And it was nice that it was a natural, mixing of people. And we in Marvel just wanted to have a group that were as different from each other as possible. So
powers-wise.
And powers and powers were different, and personalities were different, and histories were different. So, but it happened at a 4 and 4. And looking back, it was weirdly groundbreaking, because we'd go to shows even after this, after X-Men was so successful, and they look at us and say, no, you got 7, give us 6 guys and a Smurfette. Yeah. And because they just aren't used to action-adventure heroes being female, either, I don't know, from storytelling point of view or toy sales. Who knows what's in the back of their minds when they make those decisions. But we've been actually told, scale back. If you split it 50-50, make it 80-20. And that's, obviously we didn't get that at X-Men because our boss was a woman, and a smart one. And
she knew the books, and she loved them. So, yeah.
And give Marvel credit. I mean, they were not, if they came up with a cool new character and happened to be female, they'd play her out like crazy. They were just interested in who made good stories and who sold comics. I didn't get a sense from talking to them that they had, any sort of gender agenda.
Oh, Lord, say that 3 times fast. Yeah.
Speaking about, all the female characters, one of the things I've noticed is that almost most of them passed the Bechtel test, which is awesome. Is this something that you are hoping or expecting the creative team of X-Men 97 to do?
Well, again, it's been 30 years since the first episode. And it's like, have you learned nothing?
They will.
No,
And partly it is because they're starting with our team, and so it's not like they're recasting interesting. You make a point about that test. We thought one of the things we love a lot about the movies. Imagine you work on the show for 5 years, and then you see, they're going to do a $200 million movie with Patrick Stewart in it.
Oh my God!
So I thought in the first film or two, I thought they were struggling to find out what to do with the women. That Storm didn't really have anything to do in the first movie, and Rogue was just kind of a victim, and so suddenly what had been balanced in terms of leadership and powers in our show suddenly was very unbalanced in the first movie. And I don't think that was intentional. I just think when they were telling the story, whoever was involved in the many, 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 many revisions of that story just didn't quite have a handle on what to do with the female characters. So it is something that can be lost, and they could lose it on 97, but they're not going to. It's believe me, from what we've seen, they understand what we did in the show, and they love it and respect it, and so they are not going to return the women to being accessories to the men.
And building up on the representation of women, with success of Black Panther and the Disney Plus show Ms. Marvel and the film Captain Marvel, do you hope the new show takes the opportunity to explore characters' cultures and incorporate them, organically in the show. I know in your run, it happened a bit with Storm.
Yeah.
No, I guarantee the folks working on New X-Men 97 are they can quote us chapter and verse on each of the characters and what they can do with them, what they can't do with them. I have utter confidence that it's the same feeling for the characters. It's the same love for this group of found family members who wouldn't necessarily stick together if they all walk past each other on the street, but have, for various reasons, come together and are now this unbreakable team.
But I think they also, being 30 years later and after all that we've gone through,
Yes,
I think they are more aware of these issues and say some of the personal background. Like, we never spent much time. We basically thought of Jubilee as a very young orphan. We didn't think of her as being half Asian, and so I think,
or wholly Asian. I think. But anyway, yeah.
So there are. I know that they will dig deeper into things like character background than we necessarily had a chance to do. We had 30 years of comic books to dig around in, and some places to touch. We, like, for instance, but there were elements of their lives, their personal lives, that we just really never didn't get a chance to explore, and I think they will.
In defense of the original series episodes, looking back, it was a challenge to service a team with 8 members and like the Den Mother in the form of Professor Xavier. Trying to give each one of those characters good, solid, strong stories. It was like a lot of balls juggling in the air, unlike, say, Batman, where it's Batman and the universe of the villains against him. X-Men, I'm not going to say there wasn't time, but just trying to get the stories out and keep the team accounted for was a big deal, in trying to make sure everyone got serviced in legitimate ways. And that at that moment did not include some of the background on some of the characters, and I'm hopeful, confident that they will explore that too. I always thought, wait a second, Jubilee is a foster child in the foster care system and has been, taken into the Xavier Mansion. I really thought that her own background as a foster kid in America could have. There are stories we didn't get to tell, but hopefully they'll explore those kinds of things, for example, in the future.
What a lot of my friends and a lot of the younger writers writing X-Men comics now, what really got them into it is this sense of found family and knowing that it doesn't matter who you came into the world with, it matters who you have to take care of you now. And so what was it that really drew that theme over and over into these stories in the show for you?
I think it's more powerful emotionally than anything else that you could throw out there. I mean, certainly you start with this idea that these folks don't fit in other places, and there are issues with them fitting in with the dominant culture. But week in and week out, what binds them together and makes you care about them that much more and care about seeing next week to see what happens to them is this sense that these are 8 very different people with very different backgrounds and cultures and personal histories that suddenly care about each other in a way that is because they've created this family. And that's just, I think that goes through a lot of the best television and storytelling. I mean, people love The Godfather not because they like criminals, but because there's a sense of family among these people, that they would do anything to help each other. And that without that, it's a bunch of thugs shooting each other. So I just think it's such a powerful human storytelling device that we were all aware of it, and it bubbled up. And it just, when you're doing an action cartoon and you're trying to put people in jeopardy, which is hard when the people are this strong, actually getting them in real jeopardy, it's difficult. When you're throwing heroes in jeopardy, then you're creating this, the rest of the team, they're caring for the person in jeopardy just leaps out, all the more. And you realize, I mean, some of these people leave the team in disgust, and their hearts are broken, they're about to give up, and then, an episode or two later, they come back because they realize this is the center of their life. And that, I don't think it was intentional. I just think it's when you're given, in effect, a household of people, then, they look out for each other, and that makes for stronger storytelling.
I'm petting my dog over here, by the way, and he's making my chair spin around, so I apologize. Yeah.
What kind of dog do you have?
He looks to be German Shepherd.
Looks to be.
Well, he's a German Shepherd, we think. We got him through a rescue, but he's a big, sweet boy.
How long have you had him?
1 year in July.
Yeah.
Yeah, he came to us as a grown-up, so yeah.
What's his name?
He came with the name Jethro.
From the Beverly Hillbillies, we believe.
Yeah. We assume.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Big sweet guy, so it fits.
We have pets that make cameos in our podcast all the time.
Just to the point of the found family thing, as a writer on the show, it was never who's going to have the biggest, power explosion thing this week. It was always, what is the human story for this character or these characters? What is the emotional core? They happen to have superpowers, but that wasn't what the storytelling was about, if that makes sense.
It does. So you mentioned that you're consultants basically on the new X-Men series, and you can't talk a lot about that. But I do want to ask you, what are the differences that you've seen so far between making a series for linear TV, streamed on television or broadcast on television, versus making it for a streaming service? Are there any differences that you've seen?
Oh, that's interesting.
Well, I'm going to say less to that point, but to the point of how the industry itself has changed since the end of X-Men, the animated series. Good Lord, they got a lot of bells and whistles these days just to make animation. Computers, for goodness sakes. We're talking to you on a computer, and it's going out live or recording it for the universe. The production of animation has changed so dramatically. With the computer-aided design and all these things that's happening. And we got to be the grumpy old folks and say, how much time do you have you spent developing this show? How many weeks and months? Whoa! Like Monty Python. We didn't have weeks or months. We slept in a hole in the ground and we were happy.
I think they're more aware than we were about thinking about the ends of episodes as cliffhangers. I mean, when we had multi-parters, we were absolutely aware of that. Oh my God, what's going to happen next? Whereas if we had just had 6 or 7 random episodes in a row, we just would resolve a story and then pick up another story next time, and there was no sense of urgency and telling the audience, oh, they got to come back next time or they won't know what's going to happen. We resolved 50, 60 of our 76 episodes, just at the end of the episode. Whereas now, when they're, as you say, they've got 2 seasons. They've greenlit the second season already.
Announced it at San Diego Comic-Con.
So the people that are overseeing this, and they are very much connected in a way that we were not able to do after the first season. So you've got people looking at however many that become. I don't know if they've told how many is per season, but that's lots and lots of episodes and character arcs, and each one, I think, is more aware of its cliffhanger going into the next episode to be hooked and going on and on and on to go through the entire season than we were. It wasn't something that was, when we weren't streaming, was really that much of an issue. And I also think that they probably could get away with a little more, not, last time you remember, or,
previously
not touching base as much, that they can zip into the next episode because they figure that, half their audience is watching these in order without pausing. So I think we sometimes took a care to make double sure people remembered something from the previous one, or we have, had the previously on, so people wouldn't lose track of things. And we were also warned, since we were making it for kids, people kept saying, "Oh, your shows it's way too adult and way too complicated. They won't remember, who's got what power and who means what to whom," which is just silly. The kids remember all this stuff in spades. But we, I think, had to do more to remind people what came before. I guess if you think a lot of people are going to be streaming this, you certainly don't want to be repetitive. You certainly don't want to, okay, well, I just saw that, 30 minutes ago, and I went up and I got my sandwich, and now we're seeing a similar scene again. We would have a week in between, and I think it was a little easier for us to not think that way. But yeah, I think it speeds up the storytelling a little bit to have it streaming.
And let me just put this out into the ether, because, hey, Disney reordered the sequence of the episode, so that happened. Wouldn't it be awesome if they chose to roll out X-Men 97 on Saturday morning? For those of us of a certain age, Saturday morning with that bowl of cereal or that Pop-Tart in front of the TV. Oh my gosh, that would be a delightful 90s throwback. But
being a continuation of the show, can you really have X-Men 97 without any sort of previously on X-Men?
There's gotta be.
Well, we'll find out.
We'll find out. Yeah.
It's just a fair to say something.
I am terrified.
Chris is really intent on the previously on, because as we're covering X-Men, the animated series, we do a previously on to help people along the way with our discussion. Sure. So he's really interested in learning tips and tricks on how to put together a really good previously on.
Oh, I wish we had her here.
Sharon Janis.
Sharon Janis. Who was an editor for the first 4 seasons. So 80% of the shows she was the primary video editor on, and she put those together, and she had done those for primetime before this. So she had a real feel for what 30 to 60 seconds worth of material could catch you up. And it's a real art, because, your episode 45, if this episode is more, say, Storm focused, you might have to go back through and find out, Storm tidbits from 2 seasons ago that might help set up this new Storm story better. And she was really good at that. It wasn't just, oh, what did we see last week? It was very much, okay, I understand what this new episode is. What bits do I pick to get people up to speed to when they start this new story? They've been reminded of the highlights of the past 3 or 4 years.
And again, to give a shout out to Sharon Janis, there was a lot of pushback about coming up with a previously on X-Men clip to kick off most of the episodes. She then pointed out to them, well, I'm using animation that you've already animated. This is not 45 seconds of new stuff. So you're saving money there. And that's what okay, all right, fine. You do that then. So
yeah, no, she was really good at it. We can't take no credit for that. Didn't do a thing with it. It was all her doing.
Hear that, Chris? 30 to 60 seconds. Got it?
I've been good on the time, but I've also mostly been pulling clips of what sounds really funny out of context.
There'd be a lot of that there, I'm sure, for the picking.
So what's been the biggest challenge you've had going from your roles as a lead producer and writer to being consultants? What are the challenges that you've had to run into there?
That's interesting. The lead producer was just all consuming. I mean, literally when we were in the middle of, when it wasn't a break in production, when we were in the middle of a show 7 days a week, and we'd take a half day or a third day when we could, to hang with the family.
Yeah.
But it very much was, we didn't take vacations. It was, we've got the responsibility for these 13 or these 26 episodes, and focused, and very much just concerned with every single detail of what's in every 40-page script, and looking at the storyboards to make sure that they're reflecting what we wrote, and that we're communicating well with the artists, and listening to the tapes and making sure that we've communicated properly to the cast. All these things, all these details, it just becomes your entire life. Whereas consulting, we've got much younger people with a lot more energy doing that, putting in the 60, 80-hour weeks. And we can look at an animatic, a simple, rough version of what they've done and say, oh, well, I'm not sure I would have done quite that way.
Or would the character really react this way?
Yeah.
Those kinds of questions.
Knowing that they are on top of everything,
Yes.
and it's their decision. We're just there. They maybe see something with fresh eyes, which is 1/50th the work of actually building a show. So in that way, it's much less demanding. But it's still it's a little frustrating. You get into it and you start imagining, well, if I was running the show, and you got to stop yourself
Yeah.
because it's not our show.
No.
I mean, we're here to help,
Yes.
but it's there.
It's theirs.
Bodemayo he's the showrunner. He's a great guy,
Great.
and we've seen what he's got laid out for.
La 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 la
for the
la la la.
season.
Yeah.
No trust here.
No trust whatsoever. This is being recorded.
Yeah. So, but in any case, so we see that, and so our position more is just if we get a great idea, something you might use, we get to it. We see a red flag, but it's much gentler a job than just jumping in the deep end and spending 9 months straight not thinking of anything else.
And it has afforded us a certain luxury time-wise to I keep working on writing just for different shows and different arenas,
Or doing the books.
or writing the books. That
Which
has been fun.
Or walking Jethro.
God, if we,
Yeah.
it's like water skiing with him. But yeah, we're working on that.
I've got a 90-pound golden retriever, so I have to take him on a 5-mile walk every day. Otherwise, he tears up the house. So I completely understand. German Shepherd's very similar energy-wise.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also, since you're involved in the show now, is it kind of like going back to your 25th high school reunion?
That's the beauty of animation, is that the voice talent can remain the voice talent. I mean, The Simpsons has been running for 32 years now, or some insane number.
Yeah.
But then to hear their voices again, we've gotten to know Lenore Zan, who was our rogue, and other voice actors. In fact, we just saw Lenore at San Diego Comic-Con, and she will be back on the new X-Men 97. And you're right, it was like a reunion, but it was also like starting graduate school. A whole bunch of cool stuff happening, a whole bunch of cool people involved.
Yeah, and curious how this new twist is going to happen, because it's not just they're not redoing it. They're taking the same people and giving them new adventures.
Yeah.
And so in that way, there's a curiosity,
Sure.
curiosity to it. But it's incredibly gratifying that there's the interest out there.
Oh my God.
To continue doing the stories, and that's not something that we get. We've worked on dozens and dozens of shows out here. It's just the way, if you're out here long enough, you work for just about everybody in town, and it's really rare that one comes together like this show that came together, and that it's humbling at the same time, because you realize, well, I thought I worked pretty hard on those other dozen shows, but they didn't work out quite as well. Well, there just was something magic about this, and that's tough on them. There's all these fans out there, and they're going to be expecting similar magic, and boy, that's tough. We didn't have any expectation when we hired to do the first series
For a season.
Hollywood didn't think it was going to be successful. We were all let go as soon as we wrote the first season. As soon as artists drew it, they were let go. Just okay, well, let's see if this plays or not.
Yeah, because they assumed it was going to flop.
Yeah, and so in that way, there was no internet. There wasn't social media. There weren't 10 million fans curious about what we were going to do with the next story, and maybe angry if we didn't do it quite right. So none of that pressure. We just got to do the show we wanted to do given these characters in this world, and that ended up being just this incredible gift to us. But so the people doing the new show have much bigger budgets and much longer time to work on it, but they also have many more pressures on them than we had when we're creating something in effect from scratch.
Yeah.
So you guys bring up Lenore, you bring up the internet. A certain portion of the internet kind of went crazy when they saw Lenore playing Marvel vs. Capcom 2.
Oh, that was so great. Yeah, wasn't that fun?
When are we going to see video of you guys playing on that beautiful 6-player X-Men cabinet?
Well, if someone wants to drop it off at our front door, we could give it a good home.
And just not many people realize this. We have split loyalties in that video game because the first season of Street Fighter, we were the story editors on that. We ran the show on the first season, so we know those characters as well. And they're not, obviously we don't know them as well, but we have a stake in both houses.
Yeah, who do we choose?
Yeah.
All of them.
You're proud of both of your children and you move on.
There you go.
So what are your thoughts recently this year of the use of the X-Men theme and characters, quite frankly, in Doctor Strange and Ms. Marvel now?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Wow. Great fun.
Wow.
Great fun. And we just assume there's master plan. There's some sort of, Bonneville Island versus with thousands and thousands of, Marvel employees looking at, planning all this stuff, little detail here, little detail there, because everyone's asking what's going to be like when the X-Men get integrated into the MCU. And I look at them and shake my head and say, I couldn't keep track of just the people in the X-Men universe, much less integrating all of those. So I don't wish that on anybody. But obviously, there is a master plan of this, and these little tidbits are driving the fans crazy, which is great, which is good showmanship. Uh-huh. And it just, to us, it's a signal that they've got plans for the X-Men. And that's what that means to us. And so that was until we started hearing those little
music
teases.
Yeah.
You're not sure. Are they going to get the rights back together? Or what are they planning? Are they going to do any more animation? Because fans would ask us that when we go to cons as well. Are you going to do another show? As well, it's not up to us. So we hope they do. We think they should. But those kind of teases indicate, oh yeah, they're all in on this. They've got big plans for the X-Men, and they're just letting us know a little bit at a time and driving us crazy.
I don't know anything, obviously, but I've been speculating that Kevin Feige doesn't really have any plans for mutants until like phase 7, which hasn't even been announced yet. So that's the type of long burn I'm thinking Disney/Marvel Studios is taking on this.
They can do it. And goodness knows they have come up with some excellent stuff on Disney Plus and in the features too. I mean, I can't keep it straight. It's remarkable what they've been able to do.
Yeah, and the thing in the Doctor Strange trailer where it's Xavier's voice, but it's from the movies, but it's his
green suit
and yellow hover chair from the animated show.
Yeah.
So that just was a tip. Oh, okay, they're gonna do something with the animated show. I mean, those are little clues we're looking for that they're tossing to us. But we were not warned about that, and we actually responded to that, and we're on social media that day saying, "Oh, look cool! It's the animated Xavier in
the new trailer for the movie."
And we got a note back saying, "Oh, look, don't assume that." Well,
okay.
That's what
All right.
and that's what it ended up being. But
the Marvel snipers are after you guys too.
Boy, howdy.
So, Eric, you have a lifetime of telling stories, of learning how to tell stories, and you went to college with film studies
in Tennessee.
Yeah,
umpty years ago, when that was not when that was not common, in universities and colleges to have film programs.
But anyway, yes.
Yeah, what kind of intense, heroic stories really inspired you as you were growing up and learning how to tell stories?
Geez. But heroism was a big part of it, and the idea of heroic sacrifice. Not so much, I didn't care for kind of easy, younger, say action stuff where nobody's hair got mussed and they were just having fun fighting each other. That never really grabbed me, but I think if you got my first book, my father would tell me, like old myths, Greek and Scandinavian myths at bedtime. Some pretty intense ones, pretty adult ones, but not even caring so much about how young I was, but just big heroic stuff. He was born in Europe. He was a war refugee. There was a certain gravitas to his life,
and he was a professor at a college,
a
university.
Coming here to the U.S. and finding a life and having a family after being through all that. So there was that certain seriousness to his life, and then just there's something about Westerns, war movies, historical dramas where there was a lot at stake, and people would be given tough alternatives, and they choose the right thing, and often die because of it, or have a great personal loss because of it.
Yeah.
And those things got to me, in a way. And I think we kind of lost that the last 20 years or so. Nobody seems to ever, die or sacrifice, or it's not just happy endings. It seems to be kind of consequenceless endings to things, and I kind of missed it from old fashioned storytelling.
Julie, I'm not going to let you off the hook here. You have expressed an interest in baking. What is your favorite thing to bake?
Oh, wow. No, baking is my happy place. The God's honest truth is a few years back, I was diagnosed with celiac disease. So suddenly I can't use flour. It's like, what? But so finding alternatives, finding, there's a whole world out there for people like me who live with someone like you, and we find our happy compromises when I can use almond flour and it tastes really good in something. What you asked, though, my mother passed years ago, but I have her cookie recipe. That's a meringue recipe. So I can make that with no gluten issues. And it's about my mom. So there you go. Yeah.
My family has my grandma's carrot cake that's been passed along. And because people are like, it uses pineapple? Why does it use pineapple? It's like, that's what grandma put in it. So there you go. Yeah, I understand. Yeah,
just a connection, sort of through line. Yeah, a way to have those moments again,
Eric, you've mentioned in the past that you got your first comic books from, I believe it was an English teacher in school, I believe, and you stole them basically from her son.
In seventh grade in Knoxville, Tennessee. This very nice lady, actually was a health teacher, but whose name escapes me at the moment. But we, for whatever reason, we had our final like on a Monday, and we had 4 days left, before the end of school. And so she just she brought her son's huge box of comics, read comic books for the hour just to get through it. And I lifted 6 or 7. I mean, they were like 60s Spider-Man and 60s Fantastic Four. And I felt terrible about later thinking about it. It's just, this woman's so nice. She brings a couple 100 comic books to school so that we can have a nice last week while we're doing finals for other classes. And I stole 6 of them. But yeah, that was what got, I didn't have a lot of money, and that's kind of what got even though they were only like 15 cents back then, but that kind of got the collection started, was her son's generosity.
I had to go back into my cabinet and find my first comic, which is a #1 issue of Battlestar Galactica. A big sci-fi guy, right? I didn't even remember I had this until recently when I started to organize my collection this past year.
Okay.
So I do have my first comic readily available, and it's not in good condition, right? It's not near mint or anything, but it's special to me. So it's going to find a nice place to display. Also, Eric, I've heard that you have a Deadpool #1 issue somewhere.
2 of them.
And just to let you know, I looked them up, and they're worth at least about $400. So
wow, because they're.
Oh my God.
Well, I don't know. I'm not sure what mint means unbreathed upon, but they just grabbed the guys at Marvel, handed it to me. Here's check out this new book we've got.
When you were in New York, right?
We went to New York for a couple of days and sat down with the comic book people after we'd done 2 seasons. Say, okay, seasons 3 through 5. Let's talk about some different kind of stories we might take. And he handed me, I think he handed Larry a couple as well. I just put them in a folder and put them in my briefcase and put them in a filing cabinet when I got home. Never opened them. So they're both unread. I mean, I don't know how well they were handled before they were handed to me, but they seemed brand new.
But they came from the source.
So yes, I've got 2 of those. I found them in a whatever episode it was that we were working on when we got handed that. It's in that folder, so they're there. And that's
they just created
400. I'll have maybe have to lose one of them. and keep the other. Maybe get Ryan Reynolds to sign it.
Oh yeah, like we can just call Ryan.
Yeah,
Reynolds
like we're tight like that. But yeah, that was it was a new character, and I think Larry liked the design, so Larry put him in Dark Phoenix, put him in just in a fever dream that Xavier had, again without permission. But
Easter egg.
Those are just fun things we did. I admit that I didn't open them, so I've since learned to love the movies. But
that's true. We got the Deadpool.
But yeah, Deadpool #1.
So Eric, you were one of the key people in college in charge of your film club, I believe. What were some of your favorite titles that you showed?
Oh, geez. Really weird, obscure stuff, because it's hard to think back into the 70s, which is when that was. It was before VHS became even, before home video kicked up in so that people would have access to obscure movies. So all you really had was, the dozen movies that were playing at the first run theaters and nothing else except for at colleges. Colleges would, this secondary market, you get 16 millimeter prints, or sometimes we had better ones, but it was this non-theatrical market, they called it. And we programmed like 180 movies a year at our college. And it was great because we got to see all these, old 30s John Ford movies, obscure 50s and 60s foreign movies. One of my favorites called Eyes Without a Face, which is a French horror story about a broken-hearted plastic surgeon who's trying to, cut the faces off of innocent young women to restore his wife's daughters. You're right.
Yeah,
his daughter's beauty. So anyway, we would pick a old Sam Fuller movies like Naked Kiss and just stuff that never would come close to ever playing in a first-run theater in the 70s in our town. And it was a cool time for that because people were just discovering this great legacy of American movies from back to the silent era. Buster Keaton was like an absolute favorite. We showed 2/3 of his stuff. And we even made sure, if you watch sometimes, silent movies, they're playing too fast, and so they don't seem very real. But we had an adjustable projector, so we actually showed them at the right speed. And they were stunning. They were beautiful.
And this was old-fashioned film that they would send you in reel
they'd send us,
cases?
Reels, either of 16 or 35 millimeter film. And we had two different auditoriums, one with each kind of projector in it. And we'd show movies, and it was great. Obviously it was how I did my, I learned the world out there, because otherwise, watching Saturday Night Fever, current movies were cool and I enjoyed them and we didn't miss them, but there's like not having a library. Suddenly, before home video, you'd hope to watch a movie at 3:00 in the morning on a TV channel that maybe had 20 minutes cut out of it. That's what's kind of the standard. If you could see an old movie at all, you might see a bowdlerized version of it on the Late Show. But programming for the college, you got to see this whole world of cinema, and you got to help choose it. It was very much like the Senate, 30 different people arguing, and no, we need this Peckinpah movie. No, we need this Ingmar Bergman movie. And you'd create deals. Well, I'll vote for yours if you vote for mine. And so it was my favorite part of college was the programming movies for the college.
So, Julia, what are some of your literary or artistic inspirations?
Just authors, or
yeah, whatever inspires you.
Well, let me just say, I love to read. And I love to read as a younger person. And I always thought I was a little too hip for the room in junior high when I was reading, books that we had in the family, like Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, just because it was written by a woman, and it's an amazing story. Also, Laura Ingalls Wilder with Little House books I love those. I was at the right age to read those. I know there's issues now with that, but that was something that had a major impact on me in terms of telling a story. And then you've got your classics. You got your Jane Austens. Somehow I'm mentioning all female writers right now, but just reading anything on the human condition can always help with different ways of looking at things or different insights. If that answers that.
And I'm assuming that if you're going to continue to be connected with animation, you have to kind of sit around and watch cartoons yourself. So on Disney Plus, what are your favorite non-Marvel, not anything that you personally worked on shows just
on
to
Disney
watch?
Plus?
On Disney Plus,
or just of all time?
Or you're just saying on any channel? Because there's a lot of channels now.
Well, let's stick with Disney Plus, just in the theme of our show.
All right.
You got to cut a lot of things out somehow. We'll make it a little easier for you.
Fair enough. I'll say this about X-Men being on Disney Plus. We've received word that the numbers for the folks watching X-Men the animated series are really high for this kind of streaming service, and I think that helped sort of show Disney that there was still a fan base out there for X-Men the animated series stories. So we'll see where that goes. Golly, I don't mean to put on the spot. It's just hard to hard to remember
what's on and what's off, because like we blitzed Rick and Morty, which was great fun. But I don't even know if that's on the channel. And then there's all the features, like the Pixar features, like Up
and Soul, and the animated features are remarkable.
There's so much to watch. I mean, we could spend the rest of our lives and not catch up on all of it. But the early stuff when I was growing up, I have friends that are big Disney files that loved all the Disney features like crazy and wanted to be animators because of them, that sort of thing. But that didn't grab me as a kid. What grabbed me was the smart-ass Warner Brothers cartoons and the smart-ass Popeye cartoons and the Fleischer cartoons, and then getting into the 50s Bullwinkle. So there's a theme here, kind of progression here, where these people are writing what, looking back, are some pretty adult things going into these cartoons. There's stuff in the Warner Brothers cartoons. It's just hilarious. These people all wrote for each other, and just those things last forever. And it was the characters in them. It wasn't so much, again, I guess for the artists, it was, oh my God, look at the design in Snow White. Well, or look at the look at the animation in Fantasia. To me, it was Daffy Duck interacting with Bugs Bunny. It wasn't how well they were animated. Sometimes it was just so over the top of some Tex Avery stuff that it was unavoidable how cool it was. But I think 9 out of the 10 memories are dialogue memories and character memories from those cartoons.
Well, I hate to tell you that you're wrong, but the correct answer is DuckTales.
That's one of 2 shows I did not DuckTales. Yeah, one of 2 shows at Disney for the afternoon that I did not work on. Darkwing Duck, yes, but not DuckTales.
Yeah. So she wrote 14 Chippendales. So we watched the recent Chippendale movie, which we both really liked. Thought they did a really fun job with it. Mm-hmm. Excuse me, I wrote 4. She wrote 14.
If you have time and you enjoy Found Family, I suggest the Owl House.
Oh, I've been hearing wonderful things about that. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. That would be.
It's so hard to keep track. I mean, there's so much. There's there's new movies. There's new live action series, and we enjoy all of those. Just, I think we're going to burst with all the incredible television that we're being offered. It's just.
Yeah, I'm a teacher, and so for my students, like they're talking to me about like the other X-Men, or they're discovering Smallville, and for them, I have to realize, for them, everything's new.
Yeah,
everything's new, and so sometimes they don't understand. It's like, Miss Ely, this show Smallville, why is it? How come it's paced like this? And I'm having to explain to them, well, it came on during here. It was before the MCU and before this, and it's very interesting talking to them about what they've grown up with. And have you noticed any of that with like your interaction with?
Oh yeah, with our kids. I mean, our kids, for instance, loved Smallville. They were liked our show as well, but they would come to us with stuff, and our niece in particular is a crazed anime person, so she would have obscure animes that she would find somewhere on the web, that she'd show to us. So it is fun seeing what excites new generations of people on television, and we kind of weren't aware of it while we were doing the show because the kids were fairly young, but they would come to us afterwards and say, Mom, Dad, you don't understand. All of our friends are watching your show, which was our first real fan interaction. Wasn't at cons because we hadn't thought to go to them yet, but was our 7 and 8 year old telling us that the other 7 and 8 year olds are all running home to watch the show on Saturday.
Did those other 7 and 8 year olds know that it was their friend's mom and dad?
I don't know if our boys lorded it over their friends like that, but
their friends know.
They would hang around here a lot.
They'd come hang in the office.
Yeah. So, and I'm not quite sure what they thought the writers did
on a cartoon.
It was a cool show and fun job. So that was about as far as it went.
Yeah.
So Eric, I know you consulted on X-Men, the original movie.
Yeah.
So you've at least had that involvement, but there's been a lot of Marvel movies since then. Do you happen to have a favorite?
Yeah, I think it just shows again kind of a darker, more serious side for me. Logan was really, really got me. That one, and our dear friend Len Wein, who co-created Wolverine, saw it and was really touched by it shortly before he passed.
Yeah.
Logan, of all the X-Men movies, I think maybe the one First Class, when we first see the younger group, I always was fascinated with what all these characters were like, 10, 20 years ago, or Charles when he was young, how they grew into the people that they are today. So that one of the many, many X-Men movies kind of grabbed me.
Let me jump in, and the live action stuff on Disney Plus, Moon Knight was remarkable. I thought, it's kind of fun. Binging hits me differently. I love binging, but I also remember what it was like to have to wait for a new episode of a show to come on a week later. So, but again, just watching the more current stuff, Moon Knight, I thought was remarkable. And I'm with you on Logan. Logan was a beautiful capper to what had been 17 years or 25 years, depending if you watched the animated series growing up and then you started watching the films, to have it wrapped that way.
Yeah. It's weird. I can make a connection here with the Chip and Dale movie, oddly, but in both Logan and Chip and Dale movie, it's like now it's later. You're seeing these characters who were part of something, but they're real people, and now they're older and they're failing and they're retired but you're treating these comic book characters or animated characters as real adult human beings that you know as friends or neighbors. And that, when people are able to write that, I find that more exciting than a lot of the bigger spectacle in some of the movies.
So I'm going to ask you both this final question, and it's to help people that want to get involved in the industry. So if you were mentoring a junior in high school, and I think that's probably about the appropriate age,
Sure.
that wanted to enter the industry today, what would you tell them?
Well, let me ask the question, what do they want to do in the industry? Do they aspire to be a writer? Do they aspire to be a director or a producer? Or do they want to go be an extra on a movie set? The industry is, or an artist, it's depending on what they would want to do. I would encourage them to check out what do you like? What about that appealed to you in terms of being the viewer of something? Do you want, if you wanted to write for, if you want to write for anything, you need to write. If you want to draw for anything, you need to draw. And if you're a young person in school, well, start writing, start drawing.
Yeah, there's so much. I mean, the word easier is cruel.
Yeah,
but when we were young and say we were excited about movies, well, movies were something foreign, like saying, well, I'd like to be an astronaut.
Yes.
It was something so expensive and so other that you couldn't imagine. Now, any kid with a smartphone can make a movie with free editing software, could make a feature-length movie in his neighborhood. And I think he should. And that's learning by doing is so much huge part of it. So the technical cost side of starting to do these things, you could always sketch if you're an artist. You could sketch with a pencil and paper, but trying out these things and seeing if you have a feel for it, see if it makes you happy, if the process makes you happy, just tell them to just do it over and over and over again and go through the difficult, courageous thing of showing it to somebody. Because especially when you're a teenager, imagine it's like taking your clothes off in front of somebody. But show somebody a story and you're asking them to say, I like what you did. I get what you did, or this is terrible. You should throw this away. I have no clue why you wrote this. That could be an honest, response to the thing you're. So when you're becoming better at what you do, you're having to show it to other people, because unless you do, you're not going to get anything. You're not really going to grow of it. What we tell writers is to think of the people that would be hiring you. Put yourself in the position of the person hiring you. And the simple, easiest way for us to visualize that is at Disney, about 3-4 times a year, they'd have an open call for artists. And they were asked to bring their portfolio in. So there'd be maybe 15 working artists at Disney Animation, and an unknown artist come in and say, look at my drawing. Now, if you haven't spent 3 or 4 years drawing a couple 300 things, throwing out 90% that aren't working very well, you're not going to have a portfolio. You really need to put in the effort to try stuff and have something to show to people when they look. Because if you get hired, you're going to get hired to do the hiring company a favor. They need someone that writes well or draws well, and they've got a space for you now, and they need you to fill it. So they're going to look and see, what your talent is. And unless you put in the hours, it's like being an athlete. Unless you put in the months and the years of practice and trying and getting better at it, you're not going to have anything in your portfolio. Going and say, well, I've got some great ideas for some artwork. We get that all the time with writers. Well, I never really kind of finished the script, but I've got all these great ideas for them. Could we talk about those? I said, well, write 4 or 5 for us, show them to us. We'll tell you how we want to help you with them. But until you've got something for us to look at, we really can't help you. You need to get down and do it.
Not so long ago, whatever you're interested in pursuing, say in the industry, go online and seek out examples of it. Like the WGA has a vast script library. Go figure out what a script looks like. If you want to, there's so many resources that neither one of us had access to several decades ago when we each came out here, that we here at the computer, I thought I had a list here on my phone. I couldn't find it, but there are so many more resources. Take advantage of the resources. And not too long ago, you and I were kind of in agreement that it's like if you want to design cars, you needed to get up and move to Detroit because that's where that was happening. You can design cars anywhere you want, but in terms of actually designing them for someone who will pay you to do that, you needed to be in Detroit. Once upon a time, you had to be in Hollywood. You had to physically be here. And I'm not going to say that's still not the case because you're bumping into people you get your crew here, your found family. But you don't necessarily need to do that just because you can write anything, you can film anything, you can put it online and just do it. Just do it. Like I said, are there writers you like? Are there artists you like? See if they have a Facebook page or a web page.
Yeah, and study it. When we were trying to break in,
Each of us.
if I needed to write a couple spec scripts, just to show I knew how to write a sitcom if I wanted trying to break into sitcoms. Well, we didn't have video libraries or streaming libraries of old sitcoms, so you just had to try to remember. Well, I've seen a lot of Taxi episodes, so I kind of know who the characters are. And there was no library of them. Now, if you want to say, well, I think I'm going to write a Simpsons to show people that I can understand characters in a show and write a really funny story. You can just hit a couple buttons, go on Disney Plus, and see 33 years of 800 episodes of The Simpsons, and analyze them and take a month and get yourself so Simpson focused that when you start writing, you will have done your homework. We didn't have that back then. Now, if you really have an ambition, if you have something that excites you, you can take the time and it's available somewhere, even if it's not on a streaming service. It's probably on the web somewhere. Some YouTuber has it,
And we're not saying that anyone listening, turn this off, get to your computer, start writing. But don't necessarily hit yourself in the head saying, well, I have to write a 90-minute feature or I have to write a half-hour comedy.
Neither one of us planned to be in animation when we came out here. We just wanted to write for TV and movies.
If you want to be a writer, can you come up with, a sketch? Can you come up with some sort of silly skit or a dramatic skit that's only 2 or 3 characters? Can you come up with something, a dialogue, a monologue for some character? Can you put something down on paper? Interesting ideas. Oh, I'd like to, that caught my ear. I'd like to try and do something about that. No one is asking you to sit down and come out with a large script in one day. That you can do it, but it's not pretty. But give yourself the opportunity to just start trying. Just start trying to do whatever it is you want to do.
And don't feel don't feel like there's any one way into doing this. I mean, people all sorts of different backgrounds that stumbled into it. It just I happened, my neighbor was working for Hanna-Barbera when they suddenly needed twice as many scripts as they needed the week before.
And your neighbor knew you were one.
My neighbor knew that I'd spent the last 7 years writing scripts. And he said, well, you've got a bunch of scripts. You got something you can show my boss? And I said, yeah, here. So you need to be short, funny. Okay. I had one of everything. So, okay, here you go. It was a taxi script. It wasn't an animated script. That she read that and said, okay, this guy can write okay. We will let him pitch. And that was the big door opening that 800 episodes later, that was what opened the door and said, okay, now somebody may pay me to do this. But I needed to have spent the 7 years writing all that stuff so that the evening that he said, tomorrow I'm going to go back and I can take one of your scripts in the show. If I didn't have anything, I was just always sorry, I'm going to have to pass up the opportunity. And so that was, jumped on and no ambition to write for Hanna-Barbera. That's not my idea of a great time, but it was a professional door opening and took it and boom, stuff happened. So that was, it was, yeah.
What you just said. Yeah. Just try.
I wouldn't mind reading that or seeing that script on Taxi someday. That would be kind of fun. Having watched the show, to visualize the characters and everything, that'd be kind of fun. Julia, as long as we're talking about getting something down and putting it out there, I know that you have an ambition to do a what if story. Have you knocked on AC Bradley's door yet?
I have put it out there in the ether. No one's ethered me back, but
well, maybe you need to knock a little louder.
I got to tell you, after seeing the presentation at San Diego Comic-Con for the new What If season, it says, oh my God, that would be a fun sandbox to get to play in.
Well, they got a third season, so you might have an opportunity.
I might have an opportunity. Yeah. I might have an Boy, that would be fun. Yeah. Boy, howdy, that'd be fun.
And talking about writing, I know specifically, Eric, that you have had a couple of books out there. I've got one on my iPad right now. It's titled Previously on X-Men, The Making of an Animated Series. You also have a graphical book with the art in it as well.
There you go. The art in X-Men, the art and making of the animated series.
So very different. Your first one is an oral history, which you wrote about. And this other one is more, here's analyzing how they came up with the look and all the production questions.
For example,
of how you put together a hand-painted animated series in the
character
90s.
Designs.
So trying to have a balance between the first two. The first one we did without Marvel because they didn't have the rights back to the show. So it's almost all interviews and personal histories. This one is jam-packed with images from the show, like original cells, like that one. So it depends on your interest. The one that's full of art is more accessible, I think, to an average fan or to someone who just has like the show. The other one is if somebody's really fascinated with learning how 5 years of holding a show together feels like.
Well, the drama in season 1 alone in this thing was worth the read. I mean,
I'm not going to argue. Yeah, because it was real. I was there. I thought.
One of the reasons that I'm showing this on an iPad here is because I don't have a physical copy because I went to look to find a signed copy somewhere and I couldn't find it. So if I wanted a signed copy, where would I go these days?
Either find us at a con or write us, email us directly, and we got cases of the books above the garage up here.
I'm sure we could work something out.
Yeah, we could contact our X-Men email address, and we can send you one.
That sounds great. And is that where fans can find you, on the @XmenTAS Twitter account and Facebook?
Yes, that's us. And we have an Instagram and we have a Facebook page, and we actually have a website that we need to get back into. Zhuzh it up. Had a lot of fun since we last posted on that. But please, we just try to be as accessible as we can, and we're happy to talk about it.
The same thing with the art book.
Yeah.
And we've got, we always make sure to have stacks of copies, because every time we go to a con, that's when, from our table, that's what we're there to sell and to celebrate. And so anybody that wants one, we can mail it to them. It's hard outside of the U.S. It's very expensive. This book's £4. So sending this to Canada is like $70 of shipping,
which is more than the book.
Yeah.
So
but the books are cheap to send in the U.S. So anywhere in the continental U.S., we can send you the book for basically what you pay on Amazon. So
you mentioned cons. Do you have any lined up in the near future?
Funny you should ask. Coming up August 11, 12, 13, whatever that weekend is.
So a week from now, Pittsburgh at Steel City.
We're going to be at Steel City.
Con,
how crazy is that?
And then LA Con first week of December, and then Grand Rapids the second weekend of November. Grand Rapids, Michigan are the three we've got set up right now for the rest of the year.
Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Yes,
12,
very nice people. We were there 3-4 years ago.
12, 13, and 14.
And
Friday through Saturday.
Grand Rapids is going to be jam-packed with the voice talent because
this is a first.
Because if you think about it, all the voice talent most all of them live in Toronto, which is Michigan adjacent. So they could drive if they wanted to. And so Grand Rapids, it's a nice middle-sized convention, and and I said there'll be 6 or 7 of the cast there.
Well, I look forward to possibly seeing you there because now you've piqued my interest. I didn't know you guys were going to be there, so maybe I'll find my way up there.
All right.
Are there any other current projects that you're working on that you want to talk about?
No, I think we're maybe said too much already about X-Men 97.
Yeah. No, a gal pal and I, a fellow animation writer, she and I took these last 2.5 years are just one long blur of being hunkered down. So she and I took it upon ourselves to write a Hallmark style Christmas movie for live action. And so it's like, why not? Why not? We had the downtime, so I'll keep you posted on that one.
See if anybody salutes that one.
You're speaking to my heart.
You have no idea how on brand that is.
Yes. You have SP is our resident Hallmark guru. We always pass, we always ask, on the scale. So if you want, library right there, SP.
Oh my God.
What I love is the fact that most of these things are filmed in like the Vancouver area where a lot of like the sci-fi and genre actors live and stuff like that. And they branched out now. They film all over the place, including Toronto. So you get some of the talent that is on other genre shows on these Hallmark shows. So it's great watching them in there as well. So I've enjoyed it. And it's good. It grates on you after a while because like nothing bad ever happens and they're all formulaic and stuff like that, right? So you really climb on to the ones that are really unique and have a twist to them and stuff like that. But put
it out in the ether on my behalf that the script gets picked up. And then we can
Will do. Then I'll have you back on. We'll talk about the crossover between X-Men and Hallmark.
Yeah, there you go. Right. There you go.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for joining us. This has been an absolute treat. You've spent a lot of time with us. I know it's time out of your day. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Thank you
for
all.
having us, guys.
Thank you very much. This is a dream come true to meet people behind the scenes. I used to be, one of the things I tell, like to piggyback on what you're talking about with entering the industry, I always also tell people there are other jobs besides art and directing. There's production design, there's producing, there is props and makeup, and all of that comes together, to make everything. So sometimes, think beyond just writing and directing. That's one of the things I always tell, because I get students, I teach science, and they're like, oh, I want to be a doctor, but I don't, it's so expensive. It's like, well, you don't need to go to med school to be an ultrasound tech or an MRI tech. And they're like, really, Miss Ely? And I'm like, yes. And so I, expand on, what they can possibly do.
Sure.
No, if you don't know, you can't, you don't know. You don't know the kind of opportunities are out there unless someone can help you figure that out. So good for you. Good for you.
Getting that peek behind the scenes is always fun, but also I feel called out again for having all these ideas and nothing written down. So,
well, okay. Yeah. Consider yourself called out. Okay. Here's my one. I made this up a while ago, and I thought it was pretty good. But the worst movie ever made is better than the greatest idea that's not on paper, because the worst movie, it had a script and it got made. So every idea you've got, write something down. Just do it. Do it for me. Do it for me.
Even the awful Fantastic Four movie?
Oh, well, yeah.
I don't want to call anyone out. I was thinking.
You can continue to call me out. I don't care.
The next one will be better.
Really looking forward to it. Anyway, thank you very much, guys.
Okay,
Thank you.
Guys. Bye.
Thank you.
Wow, that was amazing. That was probably one of the best hour and a halves of Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. I've ever done. That was really cool to be able to talk to Eric and Julia. I want to thank them again very much for taking their time out of their day to talk to us. They actually ended up talking to us for a lot longer than we had planned, a lot longer than they had planned. So really appreciate that. And I want to thank them very much for their consideration towards somebody that might be interested in joining the Hollywood industry in creating a new X-Men or whatever. They were very forthright in saying, hey, if you're going to be part of this, you got to practice and you have to put yourself out there and get reviewed and have material ready to go. And I really, really appreciate it. Now, in November, they said that they are going to be at the con in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I am strongly considering going to that just to meet up with them and see them live on the stage. So if you have a chance, please do so. They will be making the con circuit as they have said. And then also next time we'll be talking about She-Hulk. So we're going to shift gears and that's what we're going to be talking about. But I just want to thank Eric and Julia about their time that they spent with us and all their great stories and knowledge of behind the scenes.
I really thought they were going to stick straight to 45 minutes or an hour, but I think they enjoyed our questions and our banter, and they were able to discuss things that perhaps other people hadn't asked them.
This is my favorite kind of interview because you know they're coming in with a bit of an agenda, and there's no problem with that. They have their show that they worked on before, and their show, I call it their show because I don't care. They have the new show that they're helping with, and just the fact that they made such an effort to go and spread the credit around to every single person who deserved it. And as much as they could say about the new one, I'm glad that they were willing to let us in on every bit that they could, and maybe some tiny bits that they shouldn't have.
There was, as I was editing the interview, there was a couple of things in there, and I'm like, oh, he almost stepped over the line, but she reeled him back in. If you want to contact them, if you want to say, hey, thanks for all the work that you've done, they are on social media. It's at X-Men TAS. So go ahead and do that. And then talking about how to get a hold of us. If you have any thoughts about where we should go in the future, any thoughts about X-Men, the animated series, any thoughts about She-Hulk, we do have our Twitter account at Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. We also have a Discord server, and that's gonnageek.com/Discord. And you can go to the Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. channel in there, and we can have a lot of fun talking about She-Hulk, X-Men, Marvel in general, and perhaps where X-Men 97 is going to go. I will say that one of his slips mentioned introduce, right? He said introduce, and I'm like, oh, something big is going to happen with X-Men 97. Like maybe it will be the official introduction of X-Men into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Maybe it'll be a character or characters. I don't know, but that was my big takeaway. Is like, this is going to be a good series to watch. And I'm so glad we're doing the X-Men 97 or the X-Men the Animated Series rewatch prior to this, because I will have context for that. And that's always good for me. I like the world building. I like the context. Stuff doesn't mean more to me unless I know the background to it. So I'm glad that we're doing this. So thank you so much to everybody that suggested that we watch X-Men, the animated series. That's all I've got this week. You guys good?
Yep.
It's an exciting week. Like, I don't know if the listeners can handle any more than this.
Okay. So we'll let them go a week before they watch She-Hulk and then come back next Saturday, the 20th of August at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. That is our new recording time as long as She-Hulk is airing on Thursdays. And we will talk She-Hulk. Until next time, I'm Director SP.
I'm Agent Michelle.
And I'm Agent Chris.
I hope Jethro's got a walk-in by now.
Jethro's a good boy.
My only regret is that we didn't get to see his cute little face.
Not so sure he's little. The German Shepherd.
They're always cute little faces.
Thank you for listening. If you want to leave us feedback, go to gonnageek.com and you will find all our contact information and other shows. You can also visit legendsofshield.com where you'll find our complete archive of podcasts. The music heard on this podcast is by Kevin MacLeod, found at incompetech.com, and also artists on pond5.com and audiojungle.net. The opinions heard on this podcast are those of the individual hosts and do not represent Stargate Pioneer Productions, Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D., or Gonna Geek. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is the property of the Disney Corporation, Marvel Studios, and ABC. No infringement is intended.
Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. is copyright 2013 through 2022.